Don't judge me. Okay, good. Okay, I love you guys. It is 12:41. It is not 9:31. I was just watching the video I just recorded because I was like, those were some good realizations to have. And it occurred to me, I've been recently talking about, I gotta talk about these two things. Two things. One that just made me get up, which maybe I should go back like 30 seconds and remind myself about this North Pole region. Okay, God, I remember now. This is why I wanted to record because I already forgot. I'm like, what if I forget in the morning? I can't not like take note of this. Okay, so let's talk about that one first before I forget it because it's more complex than the other one that I can remember that one by the time I'm done talking about this. If not today, then tomorrow. This one might take me a while to remember. So I was talking about how the current comes across here, essentially from Dwarka. So there's a current leaving Dwarka, the puncture hole near Dwarka, that travels along the equator, or what would be the equator, seemingly the equator, I believe the equator, or it initially isn't at the equator, it goes outward to the equator and then along the equator, I guess, so it moves to the equator and perhaps at a 90-degree angle even, boom, boom, over to equator, along equator. But then this is what I'm thinking, is it flows to this boundary here, the eastern boundary of the continental shelf, and the western boundary, or of this current cut across here, is initially at this point. This is what I'm thinking, is at this point, although looking at it, let's follow this path before I do that. Is it this point? Here? Even? Maybe here. Yeah, maybe here, and that's why this is here. Yeah. So from the furthest point over, it flows here to here. Okay. And then from here, it flows across to here, where it then flows this length. Okay, now I'm a little confused because I was about to say something else. Is this current actually reaching there? It's hard to say. Essentially, what I was getting at before is that there's a current coming across here. I believe what I was thinking at the time was that the current, when I like sat up, was that the current's boundary was here. Let's look at the continental. Let's look at the actual Earth as a basis. And this is the boundary of the current. The actual continental shelf. It was initially flowing under continental shelf. So it flowed out from here, across, and into like here. I guess down to here though. So like, and there's Flemish Cap was there. Okay. So probably here then. This looks like the boundary. Okay. So, with that in mind, its boundary flowing across this way was here. and then up here. So we have a first really, really wide current here flowing across out of underneath Europe into North America. And then under it and to this point. And what this point is, what this boundary is the other current over here. So this current that's flowing from Dwarka, from the puncture hole again. So the puncture hole, the current goes out to the equator and then along the equator. Although also it like partially it's open space, so exactly like how much to the side it had to go, I'm unclear. I don't know, but in essence it went one way and the other, and when it went the other way it produced a boundary below it. So when it went to the west it produced a boundary above it, to the east a boundary below it, and this boundary below it there's there's a nova there. This boundary below it essentially ended up being this wall over here. This region probably that just got blown out by novas, so it's hard to say exactly where the current flowed here, because this current from the puncture hole it's flowing across merges with currents coming through here and begins to just create a bunch of nova centers that are pushing the continental shelf material out into arc shapes just over and over and producing all the islands here. But the current in general is going across from here and then running into these other currents where it then just hides what happened here. But generally it reaches over here, plus it like the angle might not be like straight on because the earth expanded in the process. So the way it approached it may be more like this, and then suddenly more like this kind of thing. I'm not sure. That makes me think of a flat earth. Like it used to be flat and then it turned into a ball. Sorry guys, I don't know. I'm open. I'm just saying I'm open. Sorry, flat earth people who believe or know that the earth is flat or was flat and etc. I don't know. I don't know, so this is me right now. Part of me for that. Here's another nova center. Current cuts across, makes this boundary though. But as it's going, there's that other current going this way, this big old current. And in order for the current this way, okay. No. Maybe? Pardon me. I thought I had a realization, but I think it really is like, because essentially, let's go to the second thing I was gonna say real quick is about these images. Essentially that this current, where the currents meet, so over here, this current flowing in this way, dude, meets with this wide current flowing here to here, this region. This current crosses the current and produces a just huge nova center, which is why this region is what it is, like was what it was, is what it is, how it ended up being, including Australia. Especially Australia was influenced by this, because I guess the there's this thing going on. So like one current, when the currents interacted, one goes down, one goes up. Like they cross streams and create eddies, but they also one like goes over top the other, so they like begin to like force one another in like preferential directions in a way where the current that flows out here then flows out here, so it begins to flow out in this direction, but also mostly ballooning in this direction, creating an actual space between the continental shelves. Whereas the other current continues on underneath the ground, and it then, after this interaction, passes this like boundary point where like it's almost like entering a relative vacuum now, because all of this pressure is built on the top half. There's a relative vacuum where the current, once it crosses that boundary, it goes down into the southern hemisphere, where it then just like a flame bursts into this region, creating this, and then it cuts across here and into Africa. But so what I was thinking though is like, if there's a current that's boundary is here that flows here, then there's a good chance that this current like gets knocked out of equilibrium and like comes out this way, like out here. So it's like flows out here along this direction. So there's a current going that way, I believe. I just love it. I just love it. And it's flowing underneath South America. So South America is still, like, a piece of it is there. The under crust of South America is still attached to North America here. But it cuts across it, gets to the boundary of it, where it meets Africa, and then it begins to flow in this region from underneath, because I guess it, like, this boundary, anything after this boundary, even though it focused this way, it just filled this whole width of this. And then it began to flow a current down here from this current, like a side current off of this current, almost like creating a different bond energetically. Because initially these were connected to here. Now it's only got a single bond. It's like it had a double bond. Now it's a single bond. And in order to make that single bond, it made this portion somehow by like extending, because it was attached here to here, but then it like reattached by a new single bond. And then it was also attached along the whole length to, I believe, like here. And so when it came out here, it just began to sever underground enough where the top layer just slid off as the pressure pushing against in general of this flame energetically, and just the ballooning of the earth began to just push South America. And so when this current came out here, from this general current, like hitting the boundary of this other current, and then passing it, and then being basically sent out in a side current that splits off, this current then flows down, and then it begins to interact with the other current that's coming in along the boundary and starts to produce eddies again. So then we see like the Nova Scotia eddy here, and just the eddies here, as well as probably under Flemish Cap. But then that current again passes the current that's cutting across and goes up, and as it passes it, it begins to especially be the current that cuts across to here and flows into the pole. And so when it crosses the current here, again, eddies form, and in this instance, Iceland. And then the current continues up here and really gets into this region. And then when it reaches here, it begins to flow atop the surface, I guess. I don't know. No. It just stops. It stops spreading the earth with its, like... I don't know if it even spread it really, though. What happened from this stretch? It's hard to say because it didn't really spread yet. It probably wasn't spread yet. So that's just like this current went under in reality. It went under here maybe. Under, yeah, probably under Greenland. Under Greenland. Okay, not here, but under Greenland. And while it's doing that, it's producing eddies where the current's colliding, which is basically there, which is the spreading point, which stays there. Like the point of collision was actually the boundary of Greenland and Europe at the time, creating an eddy, but then it was just like a dense mass of material that just when the mantle came up through the fracture line, the fault line, and began to widen the space by just inserting new material and widening. It wasn't able to move the position of Iceland, so it just sat at the fault line pretty much, and is still just Iceland there. So the current cuts across under Greenland and runs into eddies. So I noticed there's some like eddies under Greenland as well. So that would explain how there was a cross current there. And then the current continues up, and I guess it just physically, like this gap isn't open yet, so we can behave like the gap has yet to open, and it goes around. I'm not quite sure. Under Greenland, which then seemingly would just go over here, honestly. If I'm being totally honest, it seems like that current would cut over here, and maybe that current flows over as the Mariana Trench creating current. I'm just trying to think how this happens. I mean, I guess just the boundary of the colliding currents, just like in over here, there's the colliding currents. It produces this boundary, like this boundary. The continental crust was all one unit over top it, so it didn't really have this like preferentialness of a boundary. But once a current was flowing, a large current here, and then a narrow but strong current here, and they overlap, they produce the boundary, but they also cut upward. Essentially, this was underground, and so it cut upward, producing the boundary. And the flow that went upward was this flow rather than this flow, which I guess therefore this flow was more dense, which makes sense probably because it's a focused beam. This is more spread out. And so it went below, and maybe it didn't get really, its position wasn't like sent down, especially maybe to a degree just by the weight on it, but it didn't especially get sent down in a way to like, although over here it did. Which is down here. Interestingly, maybe it did here. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. I feel like in the past I've suggested, and I still think that it just essentially detached and was releasing material causing this. And then it Australia detached, and so it swung back over here and left behind this arc kind of shape. But because it's going over top, I guess it's created a wider and then this angle. And so over here, maybe this flow. Well, this flow is creating this boundary, which then is cut through around Iceland. When Iceland was there. Maybe if Iceland formed more like there and then like a nova moved it. Like it was more there and then it got moved by this nova. I gotta get to bed soon. I just wanted to record, especially the Iceland concept, and that this current, the concept that this current, there was a current coming back this way. Now I'm really like more precisely working through it in a way where, okay, I think it essentially here it bent off and went this way. I feel really good about that now. What exactly is going on here, though? Maybe it's bending off going back this way, but also in so doing, like bending back and opening the Gulf of Mexico. Not the worst theory. Not the worst idea. Current here. So if that's the case, there's a current whose boundary is here and here. Then down the middle of it produces the Appalachians, maybe? Almost like a tube. And at the front end has like a roundedness to it even. So, where did I say? This here basically cuts right across Hudson Bay. Down. Right? Is that the one? Here. Yeah. Yeah, and somehow in this region, maybe like there. Probably here. So it really bows out here and then begins to narrow as it becomes more focused here because it had more space to bow out here. For some reason. Because of the nucleus, I guess. I don't know if it had a nucleus though. That's the thing. I feel like they're forming them. It was just like purely currents, and then this is the after effects of just like a current in a unified system. And this one's wobbly like a shallogram. Like a sawtooth opening, because it is opening here. So this current on the sawtooth side is opening. It's opening on the sawtooth side, whereas on the other side it's really downwardly. The energy is like downward into the underlayer that is producing this like divot of just this low magnetic anomaly on this side, and on this side high magnetic anomaly because it went upward energetically instead of downward energetically. Essentially that's which way the energy flowed, maybe from a sort of balance point of some equilibrium where it could have flowed up between. Or so upward over here on the inner edge, downward on the outer edge energetically here. And also it looks like it might actually, I was just like this here, maybe actually had some relationship to some even larger current coming over here. Like maybe there's a current that just from here went up this way. I don't know why. I guess it just had a wider lobe. Like it had this one. Here's a current going out along the equator and another current going out just above the equator. Or something of that nature. And that current then is just not as strong maybe, and so it flows here more focusedly, and then it flows out here across this like exactly across this region where like the heart of Greenland's like nova centers are. Were. and then it flows across it, and maybe is what causes this region there. And then let's follow it. Energy, it then flows here, not here, but this is like afterwards. As the earth expanded, it like this is where the energy flowed to. Here. Dot dot dot. I wonder if this has a relationship to these. Like it looks like a here at that one. I think that's the one. Or no, it's that one. This one. This one looks like it generally goes to here so that it maybe this current interacts with this region to play a role in its formation. And I guess this one, where's that? Here. It does look like these are current points. Like there was a current coming out here that left this trail, and there was like the most focused portion of this current, I guess, left this trail. Or maybe it was just kind of draining, like the width, kind of like this. Like maybe initially the current went across a wider width, or it built up to a wider width, and then like it began to produce this, and then as the current reduces, it almost like falls to a bottom side of the current. Like maybe this current here, wherever exactly it was, like had material, like the currents losing energy, so they just start to, instead of going straight this way, they start to kind of fall off this way, losing momentum, and go this way, and just generally have a tendency to compile materials when when the currents were reducing their capacity, in a way where essentially down here it would just be more of a trickle path to see like each node of it. I'm not sure what's going on here. Maybe let's follow that. It's hard to say, because like maybe there's like these notches. Not this one. This one's related to the back current, but these ones are related to maybe where that. I just noticed this. This looks kind of like a. Maybe this process created a new nucleus here, and this is like the support structure underneath North America. It's pretty well centered. Where the flame, the breath, like that look like right there. That looks kind of like Australia, where like for sure the support structure is right there. It's like a table with just a single pillar. That's like mainly its support structure that its weight rests upon, in a way where it's right here. the whole of it like has a lot of weight on this region, but it's just stable enough to support it. But then the rest of the region also supports it to a degree, so it's like stable enough to support it in general. And so maybe that's something that's going on to compile mounds, like in some way. Okay, I think I'm just gonna have to start drawing these in several maps. And I think I got a good bearing on some new currents here to really make some progress on North America and just generally what's going on here. Bedtime. See y'all soon. Later.